Okay, so first thing, I'm gonna have you share your screen. I want to go to Canvas and I want to look at where you are and then in the curriculum, and then I want to go to the project
Mhm.
section, right? So what you
Okay.
said is you finished the
I'm
applying,
currently working on this one.
exactly, but you finished the applying your learning section. And I think I had already told people in an email, like that's the point where you can start thinking about your project. So that's why you reached out to me. So good. So if
Correct.
you scroll down to the project section, which is all the way towards the bottom,
Mm,
so
this one.
there's a lot of other JavaScript content that you can keep kind of poking through at different times in the course. But at this point, if you did nothing else other than the project, you would still be able to finish phase one and go on to phase two.
Mhm.
So let's start with the guidelines, that very first link, phase one project guidelines.
This one project.
So this can be a little bit much, I think, at the beginning. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't know what you're going to build, right?
No.
And it's like, okay, you need a well written README. I really think this is most useful as you get to the end of the project because you want to circle back to the requirements and make sure you've met all the requirements. There are
Mhm.
certain things that are hard to do retroactively, like the commits. Doing commits is a part of building things and saving it to GitHub. And you want to do that continuously through the project. Now, you're not going to fail the project if you have like 3 commits, but people are going to look at that and say, why do you only have 3 commits? Let me pause for a second. Do you know what I'm talking about with commits?
Like when you update something in
Yeah,
GitHub.
it's a trio of commands, and you may not have done it much um unless you've worked on I'm having a hard time thinking about the curriculum and thinking about the amount of that you've done. But you do git add, git commit, git
Right.
push. And when you do that, you basically are saving what's local on your computer and pushing it to GitHub.
Right.
And then
Updating.
GitHub notes that you have made a change, and that's what's called a commit. So
Right.
this is saying you should do that 30 times during the course of building your project. That may seem like a lot, but really, if you break it down and you're like, okay, I just finished my fetch and I got it working, commit, bam. It's like each little thing that you build can be its own commit.
Yeah. Okay.
And that just helps people who are looking back at your work think about, and this has broader implications for being a software engineer, but in terms of the school, it just helps people see how you worked through the project. Um, the video walkthrough that happens at the end, and the blog post happens at the end. So, and then this talks about scheduling your review. So again, this page is not super helpful from my perspective in terms of like getting started. But let's keep scrolling down and make sure we don't miss anything else that's important. Scheduling your review, what to expect. Yeah, that's going to be important. But again, when you finish, scroll down. Yep, 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 yep. Keep going. Okay, next. Right. That's what I
No.
thought. And again, I think this is a good thing to come back and look at when you're done with your project, or you think you're done with your project and you're like, I'm about to schedule my review. What am I in for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So hit next. Not helpful. Next.
Next. Oh, these are the
These are all
submission.
the submission links.
Yeah.
Next.
Blog, structure review.
Next.
Uh,
Scoring notes. Okay. So then I'm thinking of some other document. Let me just go back to the requirements. There may have been a link in there that I think is actually the place to start. Sorry, probably want to go back to the module because this
oh,
organizes it in alphabetical order instead of organizing it in modules or submodules. Scroll up to the top of that. Yeah, so go scroll down and click on the guidelines one.
guidelines.
The
Oh,
one
this
at
one.
Yeah, but I think there must be a link in that we skipped over. Yes, sorry.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, that's the key. Okay. Okay, so scroll down in this README. All right, here we go. Your app must be HTML, CSS, and JS. Typically with these projects, you're going to have 3 files.
Mm-hmm.
If you do a DB.json instead of an API call, then you may have a DB.json, but it's a very limited number of files that you're involving here. You have an index HTML because that's the thing that, is actually launched in the browser. You have a CSS file that does some basic styling, but the JavaScript file is where you're doing most of the work. So I think the key part of this paragraph is the list of no auth APIs. So I would click that and maybe right click and open it in a new tab, just in case it's going to take over the page here. Okay. So kind of the place to start is like, what information because it's all built around a fetch, right? You're going to make a fetch, you're going to get a bunch of information, and then you're going to do something with it. So let's just take the Art Institute of Chicago because I'm in Chicago. And if you go to don't go to that one, copy that URL and paste it into a new tab.
Okay.
Now notice that there's a query built in here. So there's an API that the Art Institute of Chicago has, and at the very end, it's a search term. So Q equals cats. You could be doing other things, but basically this provides a key of data that has an array of objects, and probably those objects have a picture, they've got a title, maybe got some other things that you may or may not care about, alt text.
Yeah. Like I can choose what I want, right?
So for instance, try highlighting one of those, I don't know if it's like LQIP. No, not the API link. That data :image/GIF base64.
This one.
Type that and put it into a URL and let's see if it comes up with a picture. Just curious if that works.
Yeah. There's a picture, but I think it's very small. It's this one right here.
Okay. All right. Okay. So anyways, you're gonna let's go back to the list of APIs that are available. That one. Yeah. So this is really the first step. You're looking at these APIs, you're looking at what they are, you're putting it into the browser, you're saying to yourself, what's out there, right? What could I go and make a fetch to and then try to build something? And I think Toytail is a great one to kind of keep in mind because essentially you're making a fetch and then probably the most common version of this project is you create a bunch of cards where you take the object and you say, this is a representation of the object. So in my example of the Art Institute, if these things are pieces of art, there's probably an image and there's probably a title. And so I can take those pieces of information, I can make little cards, and that kind of forms the beginning of my project. Is here, I've made a fetch, I've loaded up the data, and here's a bunch of cards. That's not the only thing that people have built. There's lots of other stuff, and it might be helpful for me to go back and look at some phase 1 projects that other people have done and make a little video to give people ideas about what they could build. But from there, it's like maybe something happens when you click on the card. Maybe you implement some kind of search functionality where you're searching the title of the picture and then it will update the page based on what's in the input box, or there's a submit button and then something happens when you hit submit. And it really doesn't need to go much further than that, because if we go back to the tab before this one, so you've got to figure out this API question. That running on a single page is a no-brainer, because as long as you're just doing your index HTML that's connected to your script file, you're going to be doing this in one page. Then the 3 event listeners is kind of what I was talking about in terms of, well, you've done the fetch and you've got the cards built. So what happens? You click on the card, you mouse over the card, you submit a form, like you've already, boom, you've done 3 events. Like that's the whole project.
So
And
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
and then the fourth one, so I would say 1, 3, and 4 are the most significant requirements. And the fourth one, if you've done the API call right, you're going to have to go through an array of data
Right.
because you're going to have an array of objects that you have to deal with. And so that's where that gets handled.
Oh yeah,
And
that goes hand in hand.
right. You may do other things as
Yeah.
well. Maybe if you did a filtering with the form, then you would be doing it again. But as long as you properly made an API call and gotten a response that has an array of objects, you're going to be able to hit 1 and 4 at the same time.
Hmm.
And that's kind of it. It's just
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a lot more complicated, but it's
no,
reminding me of what I've already been doing.
exactly. It's just
Yeah.
putting it into action. You build it yourself. I mean, I think the key piece of advice for all of the projects is don't get carried away. Don't try to solve the problems of the world. I mean, we do want to encourage big thinking and
Yeah.
like ambitious ideas, but also these are these are steps along the journey to build the skills that you need and to check in with, well, what did I do in this phase and how do I kind of put it into action?
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that's really
And as I build this, I'm still able to use technical coaches to like troubleshoot certain things or
no, that changes, and that's a significant
oh,
change. So the technical coaches aren't available to help on the projects, but that's
okay.
where you would go to office hours. So if you have Discord on your
Oh, yes, I do.
so if you go to Discord, you go to the phase 1 resources channel and
Phase
you
one. Oh, this one.
look in Charlotte's post, the very first thing in her post at the top is office hours. And if you haven't used office hours, basically you go click on that link just so people can see it.
Okay.
And
Oh,
this will
it
take you
looks
to a place where you can choose office hours and you can see it doesn't look like there's anything available for Wednesday, but that's because we're a couple hours away from the day being over. But there's
yeah.
tons of availability on Thursday and Friday and going on forward into the week. So that's
And
one of your main resources. That's not necessarily going to be me. That could be anybody
oh,
who does phase 1. That could be Ryan,
okay.
Nancy, Enoch, but great to meet other people, other instructors, and like that's not a bad thing. Then the other option is just to send me a direct message and say, I'm struggling with something. Do you have time? Because even if it's 3 o'clock Central Time on Wednesday and you're in the middle of your project and you're struggling with the problem, it may be that we can meet a little bit later in the
Okay.
same day.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, that it's a really good part of the program. I mean, compared to a
Yeah.
lot of traditional higher education that is about taking tests and like proving things through that kind of assessment, a project-based assessment is great because it really implements creativity and the ability to like see with the satisfaction of building something and having things do stuff and then the breaking and the frustration like, okay, well, how do I figure out why this isn't working? And there's no tests to pass. It's just you got to make it work the way you want to make it work.
Yeah. Okay. And I know there's like or I remember there's like a code, like a live coding thing with this. But it's separate from what I'm building, right?
Correct. So, well, it could be one or the other, but that's more of like when you get to the end of the project and you feel like, okay, I think I've met the requirements, the finishing that document with the expectations, that really comes into play where you're like, all right, what do I need to do to finish? But there's also, if we go back to Discord, the second thing Charlotte talks about is the review sessions. And I think the review sessions are great so that like you're pretty close to the end of your project. Go start looking at the calendar, like when's the next review session I can fit into my life, because that's an opportunity to talk. Well, first of all, to do some paired programming, which is going to help you with the live coding, and just to talk to the instructor about like what am I expecting here. So a project assessment involves 3 things: reviewing the actual project to make sure it meets requirements, and a little bit of talking about what you did. And then the conceptual questions, where there's a list of questions that we go over to just check and see like, okay, you built this project. Do you understand scope? Right? Like, talk to me about scope in your project and how it applies. So it's you having a chance to talk about your understanding of concepts. And there's a list of things for you to study. So it's not like you got to be able to talk about everything in the universe. And then the live coding. And the live coding is the hardest part because for a lot of students, it's very stressful, nerve wracking to be sitting there and like, I got to write code and solve a problem, but it's going to be problems you've solved before. Just, you're doing it live in front of an instructor. So that's to help,
Hmm.
that's to help people get prepared for technical interviews. It's one of the main
Okay. And
goals.
I know it's timed. Like, do you have any information on like how long that live coding?
Yeah, it's 20 to 30 minutes typically.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
And
Okay.
again, the review sessions is a great place to start practicing that. So
Mm.
if you wanted to, there's nothing to stop you as soon as you're into project phase, start going to review sessions and just getting practice doing it. I mean, probably if you're doing like 4 or 5 or 6 review sessions, you might end up repeating material, but it's
Yeah,
it's a
that's
resource for you to like
right.
get practice live coding and meet other students. So that's something to really think about.
So right now where I am, I think I've showed you before. Um, I just finished Apply Your Learning and I'm working on like the additional practice. Like I think this part right here. And I know there's a bunch of other like practice, I think. No, maybe not. It's other stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, like do would you say like I should start signing up for those review sessions now or like should I finish this? Because I feel like I'm still learning the whole like the differences of each method, the HTTP verbs.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, but that's getting somewhat into phase two and beyond. So I would stop what you're doing, start thinking about a project. If you wanted to do this on the side, so like you're kind of burned out or you're frustrated about something in your project and you're going to wait till office hours to talk about the problem you're having, you can come back and do more work in the curriculum. You can start putting review sessions on your calendar and say, okay, I've basically done everything that I need in order to be able to do the live coding. So what does it look like and how does it feel? And this, especially as you consider the availability of the review sessions and how they work with your schedule, start jumping into those.
oh, you're saying that I could technically start
Yes.
my
Yeah,
project now.
you should.
Okay.
I think,
Okay.
I
I
mean,
think I'll just like start planning. But I'd like to finish these because I feel like these are actually helping me. Like when
yeah,
I was working up here with the Fetch CEO, I'm like struggling to like
yeah,
remember things, but I'm seeing like the change that I'm like
yeah,
a lot more confident, gaining confidence.
yeah.
Um okay. And then like the stuff down here, like this is still phase one, but I know that I saw there's AI, there's algo stuff,
Yeah.
there's context. This is not going to be like, is this
Not
like,
it's not relevant to the project
okay, that's my
necessarily.
question.
And so, and again, because JavaScript is the foundation, it will be, there's only one phase in which you don't really build a front end, which is phase three. So there's going to be plenty of time for you to kind of come back and think about strengthening JavaScript because it's like not what you're studying, but also a central part of what you need in order to do full stack web development. So especially as you get into phase three and into phase four, it might be interesting to come back and say, can I do some of these other things in phase one just to kind of keep my JavaScript on the boil while
Okay,
I learn Python and think about databases and other things.
okay, sounds good. Um, okay, I'm glad I we had this talk because I was like looking at this other stuff. I'm like, there's a lot
There is.
before even like the project,
There is.
but a lot of it is optional.
Yep,
I don't realize. Okay. Just one last thing. Would you be able to send me this recording?
absolutely. Well, I'm gonna put it into my email that I was gonna send.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but
Awesome.
I'll send it to you directly and then you can review it and make sure you're all right with it if you want.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. I'll reach back again if I have any other questions.
Okay, Harry, sounds good. We'll talk to you
Have a
later.
good one. You have
Okay.
a good one.